And let me tell you the impact, and it does work. Attrition by enforcement. You've got to enforce your laws. You have to go after employers that are hiring illegal aliens. You have to take the handcuffs off law enforcement. Again, I love handcuffs. I think they're a great tool when they're on the right people. Get them off from law enforcement, put them on the bad guy. What's happened in Phoenix PD, Phoenix Law Enforcement Association, the largest law enforcement association in the state, just did a press release here about 4 or 5 months ago. And they said, due to 1070, SB 1070, Phoenix has a 30-year crime law. Said, no change in policy, old strategies and policies, 600 vacancies in the Phoenix law enforcement, in Phoenix PD, 600 vacancies, budget cuts, restraints, and in spite of all of that, a 30-year low in crime. And they said it is completely attributed to SB 1070. I didn't read that in the Arizona Republic, by the way. Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina have all passed SB 1070-like bills. The illegals, I can show you the papers, it's absolutely amazing. They're fleeing the states. Fleeing those states. They're not afraid of the federal government, but they know the states is really where it's at. That's where the laws will be enforced. They know that. And that's where it counts. It's about states' rights more than anything else. We must rise up. The states rise up and take their place, and most of you here are old enough to remember this, maybe a few of us, when they got together and wrote the Constitution Bill of Rights. It was the states. It were the states that created the federal government, not the other way around. They are the parent. They have inherent authority. The federal government only has enumerated, delegated authority, and limited, and it's been abused, and we know that. And I'm grateful to hear, Sheriff Paul and what he's going to do, because I love the founder. I read about our founders on a regular basis. I read about the real George Washington, the real Thomas Jefferson, the real Benjamin McCrae. I study those men, the real Patrick Henry, Thomas Young. And some of you don't remember the Tom that was the Reverend in the Old South Church and that miracle happened. And if you don't, and if you're not teaching your children, your grandchildren a love for these patriots and these founders and the principles that this republic was built on, they'll never get it in school. If you're not teaching them, how are they going to learn? If they don't learn, how do they love it? If they don't love it, how do they defend it? That is your obligation, your sacred obligation, as George Washington said. We must be vigilant in teaching our youth the sacrifices and I'm not going to quote it all right here, that brought them the turmoil and so forth that happened in order for us to enjoy this freedom. If you read the letters between John Adams and Abigail Adams, what a relationship they had. And she was probably the stronger of the two. What a wonderful lady. But they spent most of their marriage apart. But their letters were so tender about, they never once complained about the sacrifices they made, because it was about a future generation of a free people. They knew their mission. You cannot read those miracles. You cannot read about these founders and not believe that God had his hand in the making of America. I'm a strong believer in that. And like John Adams said, our commitment, our responsibility in this republic only ends with the shedding of our blood. I believe that. And we have those that have already done that. And many more in uniform that are willing to do that. And here at this level, we can't let it get away from us. We're the only things that can save this republic. I mean, if they fight and lose their lives, I've got a nephew just returned from Iraq, missing both legs in a roadside bomb. His comments to me, you get a little tender on some of this, I apologize. His comments to me, which I appreciate, my little nephew Brent. He said, Uncle Russell, he said, the only thing I really regret is that I cannot return and finish what I started in my buddies. That's what I hope to hear from patriots. That's what I hope to hear from us who enjoy the freedoms from those who have sacrificed and lost. And it is a battle. It's a battle every day. Rob Krantz was murdered during the debate of SB 1070, a good friend of mine on the border. I think the sheriff knows the Krantz family well too. And I've been down there riding horses with them. I've ridden that border. I've spent time with those ranchers, John Ladd, Roger Barnett, the Gibbons down there, Spencer Warner, all these folks. I know these ranchers, and I know what they go through. And Rob Krantz was a friend of mine. and Sue Prince. And you got to see Sue, her hands and her face, her body is as leathery as his was. They were soulmates. She rode that ranch with him every day with him out there. But here's what's happening. And I've had the ranchers come up to the Senate after Rob Prince's murder, during this debate of 1070, to tell their story. Because everybody wants to believe these are just good people, looking for a better way of life. Some, I understand, but taking jobs from Americans, the impact of social costs in Arizona, $2.6 billion to educate, medicate, and incarcerate. You simply can't afford it, period, besides all the bad guys coming. And they came up, and one after the other, their story was the same. They said, let me tell you, our families have ranched down here for generations. We admit there's always been trespassers. And we've hired some really good people. Said it's not the same today. This was story after story that our dogs' throats are cut, our animal invasion, several cars stolen. They hear noises at night. They don't dare come outside. They pray for daylight. They pray for daylight. And Janet Napolitano would tell you the border's more secure than ever. It's an embarrassment to these folks. I have a video from Rob Prince 5 years before he was murdered, begging for border security. And then 5 years later, he was the very victim of what he was begging to stop. It is a serious issue. And I could spend all night on this, and I want to do that. I do want to leave it open a little bit for questions as we go here. But folks, let me tell you, just real briefly, let me talk about, some challenging times. I can take a hint.
Hey, there's your sign.
I can tell you, I was teasing the wife coming up here. I brought some notes. I always do this kind of like a Linus and his blanket, kind of a security thing. And I never referred to her money. She said, well, if you've got them out, you got to put on your glasses. I said, well, I'm at the age I can live without sex, but not my glasses. So I appreciate that comment. But anyway, I look at the accomplishments we've had in the Senate the last few years in the House. And it's been a tough battle, 6 years in Napolitano, fighting every day for less spending. And I appreciate what the sheriff said about Congress. It is gangster government in Washington, D.C. From one end to the other. We have Republicans participating in it. They're going into debt. Your children, your grandchildren are not going to be able to pay off. It is going to absolutely destroy this nation if it hasn't already. I think we can save this nation. But if 2012 doesn't turn things around, I have great fear because of the debt we're sinking, and the burden of debt, and the spending, out of control spending, and the lack of respect. This president, backdoor amnesty, he doesn't have a right to ignore the law, and he's doing it. He's doing it every day, deciding what laws will be enforced and what won't. He is irresponsible to carry out, his duty is to carry out the laws of this land. He takes an oath of office too. And if people are going to return that man to office, and I'm telling you, it ought to not be some weak-kneed Republican either. I'm simply tired of folks going to Washington, D.C. or electing to office that don't seem to be much better than what we've replaced. It's time to get tough, and I don't mean in a mean, nasty, ornery way. Just like enforcing laws, I tell enforce them with compassion, but without apology. We have an obligation to those that are injured and impacted by our failure to enforce our laws, and it's every day. Another report just sent to me today about a gang, illegal aliens, and dismemberment of several bodies. A young baby, 1 year old, raped and murdered, illegal alien. I've got a list of police officers, 12 Phoenix police officers, murdered in Maine by illegal aliens. I have a son that the sheriff mentioned, critically wounded, almost died in a gun battle with an illegal alien involved in drug trafficking. Where does it end? Where is our compassion for those victims, those families that will never be restored to whole? Folks, we have an obligation. I will not shirk from that obligation. I had a media person call me the other day and said, well, all that you've done, was it worth the recall? I said, yes. If I've stirred the left so bad they come at me, you got to understand this recall. There's no primary. They know that. They're very clever how they put it together. The other Republican was endorsed by the Democrats, like I just said, and the open board of libertarians. You only had to get 15% of it because we're not in a big margin in my district. We will be in the new lines. You know, only had to get 15% of the Republicans vote to win. And he ran on a church name, and ran as Mr. Good Guy, took the stuff out of the left-wing textbook, got to bring the tone down. Folks, my tone's not mean or nasty. I love this guy, and I love the citizen of this guy. I love everybody. And again, like the sheriff said, the illegal is not a race, it's a crime. And Arizona didn't make the illegal illegal. It was already illegal. You know, it's just time we step up and recognize our responsibility. Quit pandering, you know, to the consumer who makes their money off from the consumption of products. The cheap votes, you have corruption, want to change the political makeup of America. The best hope to do that is through demographics, that's open borders, or the cheap labor oligarchy in Washington, D.C. that is driven and owned by the the checkbooks of the lobbyists on K Street. Enough is enough. I could go on, needless to say. Let me go ahead, sir.
I, for one, think he should run for governor next time.
Wow! As soon as I announce I'll be looking for new housing, some folks came and spoke to my wife literally the other day, and we're trying to talk her into that. It's 3 years away, and they want to start. They really were friends of hers. She loves them, and there's some folks who could help and generate a little money. And she said, well, I think that's a great idea if he wants to run as a single man. So we've got some negotiations, and must take place first of my own. Yeah, with conditions, yeah, she was. But I appreciate that. It kind of reminds me, you know, one of the things I try to teach my children, and none of us have a perfect family, at least that I know, but I try to teach them about gratitude. We are so grateful to be what we are, to live in the country we live in, and we must show it every day. We're serving the freedoms that those have died for. So anyway, but I got to tell you, it's a tough battle, and my wife would wish that I don't run again for anything, but she's supportive of what I decide to do. And here's why, and I'm not announcing today, I've got folks who are talking, and certainly I'm leaning that direction. Folks, it's just like I ran the first time. I mean, I'm so grateful for the ability that I've had to have some positive influence, I think, on the lives of our citizens in this country. We've changed the debate in Washington, D.C. We have changed the debate. 34 states are writing legislation modeled after SB 1070. The Supreme Court is going to rule on it. And again, where the illegals are fleeing from, and did I finish my statement with Pearce Pt2 on the crime rate, a 30-year low crime rate? Yeah. Do you know that Arizona has, their violent crime rate has dropped 3 times that of the national average, all since employer sanctions and SB 1070. Our K-12 system grows at 3 to 4% a year. It's down 7% this year. And it's out of neighborhoods known for high numbers of illegal aliens. We know it's happened. Even the Arizona Republic admitted, and they've never sent an illegal alien they didn't like. Even they admitted that 100 to 150,000 offended the state.
Just think how much better it would be if you were governor.
You're kind. I can tell you one thing. If I was governor, if Paul Babu isn't in Congress, I'll have him on the border with those troops again, along with the Department of Public Safety, and there will be security on that border. And if you come to the United States, it'll be with a permission slip, and they won't be the welcome rider like they were.
Most people think it's just Mexico coming into the U.S. How many countries are we apprehending?
Good question. He said most people think it's just Mexico that comes in. The truth is, there's been 133 nations identified coming across that southern border. And let me tell you a quick story.
Proof of racism.
Let me tell you a story. I saw in Border Patrol again down there, like the sheriff I speak to quite often. And he was telling me a story. He works out in Nogales. He says one night, it's fairly well lit night, the moon's out, and he says he sees down the road, because there's a road runs right along that fence that we have. You know, the tube lines and barbed wire that stand on the ground. So anyway, and there's a national highway, you know, just a mile south of that border, a national Mexican highway. So it's not hard. Yeah, so anyway, he's down there patrolling, he's running this road on our side, and he sees down there this car, and he sees a light on top, so he assumes it's Nogales PD or somebody down there. So as he gets closer, he knows it's a AAA cab. He said, "What are you doing out here?" "Waiting for a fare." It's pretty hard to get in this country, folks, when you can call AAA. Right? Sitting there waiting for a fare. Told where to wait, what time to wait, would be a long